British Columbia is the finest, in my opinion, the finest place in the world to do work on coastal oceanography. There just isn't, with all the fjords and all the bays and everything else, there just isn't any other place that beats it.
I'm Coreen Forbes, and I'm a PhD candidate here in the Biodiversity Research Center at UBC in Mary O'Connor's lab. My research focuses mainly on the patterns of benthic diversity of marine invertebrates along the coast of British Columbia, mainly in eelgrass meadows. There's a whole bunch of different species that live in eelgrass meadows. One of the most important groups is copepods, and that's where Al Lewis comes in. Al Lewis is an absolute treasure of the Biodiversity Research Center. He's one of the world's foremost experts on copepod biodiversity, and he's been working both here at UBC and abroad on copepod diversity for over 5 decades.
Think of the world's best swimmer.
Phelps is increasing the lead, increasing the stroke rate.
There has never been a better swimmer, the most decorated.
And I can show you an organism that is 1 millimeter long that can swim faster than that can. Copepods are the most abundant organism in the ocean. In fact, in contrast to some entomologists, we think, and maybe it's justified, we think they're the most common organism in the world. But they come in a variety of sizes and shapes. And they do a whole host of different things. And they've been around at least for 400 million years.
Ecology is a really interesting field because the actual methods we use to collect our data, the boots and buckets methods on the ground, hasn't changed since Al was my age.
Collecting and sampling is still done the same way. Yeah. Alcohol's been around a long time. Collecting is the basis for our understanding. If we do not collect, we do not have the data. We do not have the organisms to look at. So it's absolutely critical that for a scientist or for a person working in a museum to have an adequate collection to be able to tell the stories about the organisms and the way they make a living.
While some aspects of ecology have always stayed the same, others I feel are changing very rapidly. Deep taxonomic knowledge of a lot of these groups takes a lifetime to obtain, and it's really not rewarded in the current way we do science. These species are incredibly difficult to identify because they have very obscure features, and a lot of the time the identification boils down to pretty much the number of hairs on different appendages.
I just looked at a paper today called Is Taxonomy in a Critical State? And yes, it is. Because people are now looking at the genome, nature, and things, and they're forgetting that the organism is like an individual human that has to do certain things to survive.
Because copepods are so difficult to identify, I've turned to DNA barcoding. So DNA barcoding allows you to take a snippet of DNA and essentially use it like you would a barcode in a grocery store to identify a species. However, that barcode on its own doesn't actually tell us very much. We need to put a species identity to that barcode so we can connect that barcode to the wealth of natural history knowledge that has been accumulated over the last few decades. And Al Lewis allows us to do that. Al has put a lifetime of work into studying the natural history of these copepods. And now with modern molecular methods, we have a way of preserving his wisdom for future generations to come.
Now granted, this work is, and the work that I do is done because I love it. And the work that people did back in the 1800s and 1700s, they did it because they enjoyed it. So it has to be brought into a population through academics to show how important this type of work is for individuals, and hopefully excite people to take up the banner that we carry around with us.